Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank, where we come to you virtually from Seattle and the Great Pacific Northwest, or wherever our co-hosts happen to be that day. We'll talk more about that. If you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, you have to listen to the podcast because we talk to the best and the brightest, including our guest today. This is where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today is the incomparable Michelle Baumberger. Our guest is Russell Benaroya from Stride Services and a number of other things. Listen, after 20 plus years of investment banking, private equity, technology, and healthcare entrepreneurship, Russell Benaroya works with other entrepreneurs and business owners to help them achieve their goals. Stride assumes back office responsibilities for bookkeeping, accounting, and CFO functions so that owners can focus on driving growth, be well informed, and confident. He also provides executive coaching to entrepreneurs to help them focus their energy on the critical success factors necessary to succeed in business and, of course, in life. Welcome, Russell. We can't wait to talk to you. Everybody, you
so
can
happy
find
to
us.
be here.
Thank you. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. Michelle, what are we?
We are ubiquitous.
We are ubiquitous. We also come to you from about a dozen other cities, including the mothership in Atlanta, Boca Raton, Boston, Charlotte. We're in Dallas and Knoxville, a whole bunch of places. But we like to think that we are the most fun. I'm sure they'll hear that and disagree. But regardless, we're going to have some fun today. Russell will be with you in a second. Michelle, where are you calling in from today? It's not from your luxurious Bellevue office, is it?
It is not. I am in Washington, D.C., enjoying the nation's capital.
Oh, nice. Are the cherry blossoms out, or is it past cherry blossom time?
It's past cherry blossom, but it is lovely. It's one of my favorite cities to walk around. It's just so walkable, and every time you show up, there's something new, something different to experience.
Well, walking is good physical exercise, and so is running, and we're going to talk a little running as well with Russell. But I think I run a much different type of air quotes marathon than he does. I do an interval running. I do it twice a week. I run 3 to 4 miles, but I do a run walk. My daughter got me into that, so I run for a minute, walk for a minute, run, walk, the whole thing. And I've got my little timer going on the phone and all of that. So sometimes we do some physical running, but sometimes in business, and I know it happens to you, we also do some running in air quotes as well for business. Do you do either of, I know you do some running in business. Do you do any other running?
I actually ran my first real 5K a few weeks ago, the Cherry Blossom Run at UW. So I was doing interval training because I actually really like that as well. It gives me a bit of a break in the midst of, the kind of the hard run. But I found it hard to execute on that during kind of a full outdoor 5K. So I'm still kind of working on the strategy and the technique there. But it was a beautiful run. The campus is just gorgeous. And that was where the cherry blossoms were. The middle of the campus was just stunning.
I might have to find out what a real 5K is as opposed to an unreal 5K. That might have to be the topic of a future podcast. I don't know.
Well, just really, really briefly, it was a virtual one that I did during COVID.
Oh, I got you. So you were like a hologram or something like that.
No, I was just on the street by myself.
Well, I know somebody who is also doing some running. I know he's done at least a marathon, maybe more. And Russell Benaroya told us he also loves to do some trail running. Russell, first of all, welcome to the show. And let's bring you into this conversation because not only do you like to run for fun, but I got to believe that in your work with executives and entrepreneurs, some of them are running like maybe the proverbial hamster, and you might try to be getting them to slow down. First, welcome. Second, tell us about you and running.
It's great to be on the show, Dan and Michelle. Thank you. And when we were talking about your Unreal 5K, I thought this was going to turn into a metaverse Web 3.0 conversation, which we could go there, which would be fun. But to your point about running, I like to say that I like to suffer, and it's a little bit self-imposed. But I think part of business ownership and entrepreneurship is a little bit of that desire and willingness to suffer a bit in pursuit of achieving a goal. And there are a lot of ups and downs. And I've elected to apply that physically in trail running, and so I've run a number of 100-mile races, which can take, 30 plus hours. And I think what's so interesting about those long distance endeavors, a marathon included, is you've got to think about your nutrition, right? How you're going to stay fueled. You need to think about your kit, like your equipment and your supplies. Are you prepared to run for that long of a distance? And have you thought about contingencies? And then the third, obviously you need to have some physical capability. And then the third is, are you psychologically ready to manage through the dip when it's 2 a.m. and all you can see is that bright light of your flashlight in front of you and know that you've got another 60 or 70 miles to go. So I think there are a lot of parallels. And for me, it's been a place where I've learned a lot about myself.
So where did this brilliant idea come from to run like that?
I think like many of us in entrepreneurship, we grow through mentorship. We grow through a little bit of on the job. There's nobody yes, there are a lot of books out there, we know, but there's nothing like being in the moment of putting yourself to the test of growing your enterprise. And so this ultra distance trail running was no different, where I had somebody who was willing to take me under his wing and show me what was possible, show me that I could break through that self-limitation of, oh my gosh, I could never run more than a marathon. How do you do that? And then you're like, wait, I could do that. But sometimes you need a swift kick in the rear by somebody that's willing to push you a little.
So, I was thinking a little bit about your answer there as you brought that up. I mean, all three of us here are entrepreneurs, and that's who we talk to every single week as entrepreneurs. And we've heard a lot of different stories. One of the ones that seem to continually come up is a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, have founded their businesses without some of the things that you talked about, getting ready for without knowing about nutrition and all of the, the things that they needed. They had this great idea. They had this skill. They were able to create something. I'm going to run a business. I'm going to own it. I'm going to be my own boss. And then they fly into their trail run with one Larabar and maybe a small can of, or a small bottled water. But we find a way to be resilient. Can you talk about that so many people you probably know and worked with have dived in head first and then have had to figure out how to be resilient along the way?
I think that's pretty universal. We tend to put on rose-colored glasses when we have a great idea and a passion and see a path towards some theoretical end game that doesn't seem overly complicated. And then you get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, I had never anticipated this circumstance. As we like to say, it's a lot easier to get into a business than it is to get out of it. But here's what I like so much about those ultra distances in running is, the end game. There is a finish line. You know that this will be done at 100 miles. What you don't know is whether or not you're going to finish. So it's long enough that you may not finish. And that is exciting and a little scary. In business, what I find is that we don't really define the finish line. We don't define the game. And what is the game? Is the game like, oh, my finish line is when I sell this business and I'm fabulously wealthy and yay, then it's all great? Or is my game something different than that? Or are there rest stops along the way? And so they're like mini games to play. The lack of that clarity and definition does create a roller coaster of uncertainty.
Yeah, the word that came to mind there is visioning, right? So, when you talk about the end game is really clear. You can envision yourself achieving that. You can envision what that looks like crossing that finish line. And in business, we talk about visioning a lot. We talk about what is the 10-year vision of the business, yet the reality and the kind of the tactical piece of that is much harder. Do you have any thoughts on like ways that entrepreneurs can maybe get better at visioning?
Really effective teams, some of the most effective teams are good at the following. One is creating some psychological safety among the team where individuals are able to express themselves with candor, fully revealed in like what excites them, what makes them nervous, where they want to spend their time and energy. Because remember, so much of business is a collective of a group of individuals that are just trying to row in the same direction, but we all come with our patterns of behavior. So one is, can you create that culture of psychological safety? Number one. Number two, are you building a business that measures performance? Are you driven by OKRs, objective and key results? If you can't measure this theoretical 10-year place or 1-year place that you're going, then how are you going to know how you're tracking in an objective way? And then the third, and maybe the most important, is building a culture of retrospectives. It is acceptable to make mistakes. It is acceptable to fall off plan. It is not acceptable to not learn from that experience. And so consistent retrospectives among the team is really valuable to figure out, hey, what worked well, what didn't work well, how are we going to apply that so that we can continue to build a stronger machine?
So Russell, you just talked about the finish line. I'm going to take us back to the starting line because you can't get to the finish line without having started at the starting line. I'm curious about your entrepreneurial journey. When you first got the bug or the passion or the idea, where were you and how did that become manifest to get you to where you are today?
I was traversing a journey that was making my parents incredibly happy. So I was in investment banking in New York, and then I worked in the internet in the late 90s and went to business school and worked in private equity. And I always felt like, how am I able to opine on what makes a good business or not a good business if I haven't been on the other side of the table to run a business myself? And I was antsy, and I was in my late 20s, and I was in a role that was good, not great. And I had this idea, and I won't go so far back as to give you the impetus for that idea, but I had this idea for this healthcare service, which ultimately became a business called REM Medical. We operated sleep clinics to diagnose and treat sleep disorders. And just like the magnetism of many entrepreneurs, I sucked one of my business school buddies into the idea, and he got excited about it. And then I was like, whoa, somebody actually thinks that's a good idea. Well, I'm excited about it. You're excited about it. And then we found another partner to get excited about it. And before you know it, the fervor of launch was before us. And we decided to take the leap into an industry that we knew absolutely nothing about, nor how were we going to capitalize it, get started, finance it, or operate it, and ultimately exit. Yeah, that. And we did figure it out.
And Michelle, I'm just it's so funny that after this is almost 7 years of doing this, countless entrepreneurs and business owners, and so many people, it's almost universal. All you need is a spark. All you need is a little passion. Then if you hear even one person thinks that's interesting, it's like, this is it. I found it. Whether I know anything about doing it at all, I just found that to be a fascinating story. Michelle, go ahead. I didn't want to take your next question, so go ahead.
Yeah, and then Russell, I've known you for many years, and so I've seen you in different stages of this journey. But something that jumps out is your most recent book. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I published a book in October called One Life to Lead: Business Success Through Better Life Design. And the 10-second pitch on the book is, how you lead your life is how you lead your business. We come to our business with our patterns and behaviors, some of which are great contributors and some of which are great detractors. And in pursuit of entrepreneurship and the freedom that's associated with that word entrepreneurship, that's what the cultural lexicon associates with entrepreneurship, is freedom. Many entrepreneurs, myself included, end up finding ourselves in this self-imposed cage or captivity, a cage of our own making. I can't go on that vacation, and I haven't paid myself for 2 years, and I can never find good people, and all of these reasons why your pursuit of freedom has ended up in a bit of captivity. And in 2018, my family and I broke out of that pattern, broke out of that cage. And the impetus of that, I'm happy to share why we did it. But my family and I moved to Costa Rica for a year, and we lived in San Jose. My kids were teenagers. And that shift in trajectory of the life that I wanted to create, that I could architect, that I could design, was the beginning of starting to assess and reflect on, why was it so hard for me to get here? What were those patterns that surfaced that made it challenging for me? And is it really just about me, or do many entrepreneurs suffer from these same impediments? And I was able to interview a lot of entrepreneurs, share some of their stories, my own included, in how the book now lays out. These are the 5 steps of life design to architect a life by you versus a life happening to you.
Russell, that's fascinating. And now we're going to tell you what's going to happen to you. You're going to have to take a break now because we have to pay the bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's Spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with Russell Benaroya for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about mental clarity. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Your business is a valuable achievement, your livelihood, and your legacy. Every day, you're asked to balance business opportunities and legal risks, but engaging legal adds complexity and expense. You deserve to experience business law the way it should be: practical, responsive, approachable, and transparent legal solutions to support your business in every stage. With Equinox Business Law Group's General Counsel Services, you get a corporate legal department tailored to your business needs. Let us tackle those contracts, HR, partnership, and IP issues so you can get back to your most important work, seamlessly moving your business forward. To learn more about Equinox's fixed cost, all-inclusive legal services, visit our website at equinox.law or email contact@equinoxbusinesslaw.com. Equinox Business Law Group, business law the way it should be.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger here with Dan Wheaton, and our guest today is Russell Benaroya. Now we're going to kick off our next segment, Hot or Not.
And Hot or Not, Russell, is where Michelle and I are going to pepper you with questions about business, about life, and maybe, I don't know, running and a whole bunch of other things. And at the end, you win absolutely nothing, but we hope you have a little bit of fun with it. I mentioned mental clarity. So Hot or Not, physical activity helping mental clarity for entrepreneurs, or for that matter, anybody.
Hot, blazing hot.
And I thought you might say that, but can you talk a little bit more about why, in your experience, how physical activity, because I'll just say this, especially in the last 2 years, as we've all kind of hunkered down behind our monitors, getting regular physical activity sometimes is not as easy as it might seem. And we as entrepreneurs might, instead of not only paying ourselves for 2 years, we may not get out of our chair for 2 years. Talk about the importance of performance.
Well, we know the research that suggests that sitting is the new smoking. I don't think I have to belabor on this podcast the benefits of of working out and fitness for mental health. So that's widely out there. One of the reasons that I really like it is because it is a moment of forced disconnection. I really cannot be on my phone while I'm running. And so it's a bit of a forcing function to create space where I am designed to be with my own thoughts.
All right. So hot or not, executive coaching.
Executive coaching is hot. Executive coaching's hot. And here's why. Great athletes all have coaches. Great athletes spend 97% of their time, I'm making that percentage up, practicing. So if you believe, right, as an entrepreneur, that this is a sport, this is a game, who's your coach? And who's going to help you practice off the field so that when you're on the field, you're performing at your best? And coaches need coaches.
So I want to go off of that because I have written about, talked about the same thing. You and I have a lot in common. In fact, I can't wait to talk to you more about this. I still run into people, and you probably do too, who say, yeah, I get that logically. You know, but when you're talking about athletes or you're talking about entertainers who might, you know, musicians and other people who it's clear they're using coaches, and in many cases, multiple coaches. I'm a golfer, and I can tell you that the professional golfers have a swing coach, a putting coach, a mental coach, a physical, they got coaches all over. Do you also hear, yeah, I get that, but I don't have time to invest in what the coach wants me to do, or all that type of thing. And how would you respond to that?
Yeah, of course, that happens. And that's ego. That's ego that's showing up to protect them from some level of vulnerability that they are either unwilling to unpack or don't see for themselves. I don't think you can convince somebody of the value of coaching until this is unfortunate, right? You'd like everybody to be really proactive in how they think about it, but sometimes it's like, hey, I've got to golf a bunch of rounds and see that I really am struggling before I'm like, yeah, I need a coach. And that's why organizations like EO, for example, the Entrepreneurs Organization, are great pathways into a peer coaching environment that may trend into a one-on-one coaching. And what I would say to people is, hey, there are a lot of ways to feel like you can get connected and supported. Do what works for you and put your toe in the water and run the experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to toss this one out there because we didn't really talk about your core business in our first segment. So, hot or not, outsourced accounting and bookkeeping services.
I'm a big fan of outsourcing in general, and certainly accounting, bookkeeping, fractional CFO for sure. Not just from is this a cost-effective method of accommodating an important but maybe not particularly strategic area of my business? Absolutely. But I also believe that I want companies to invest inside their business for those things that they feel like they need to own, that makes them different, strategically different. And we happen to live in an environment today, not only a global arena, but also the technology that affords that kind of outsourcing connectivity to create a tremendous amount of efficiency and quality that comes with working with an organization that may have seen 100 clients similar to yours.
All right, I got another hot or not, and I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it anyway. You know, I know, at least when I was in school, and I think it still happens a lot. I don't know if it's anybody's fault or not, but we tend to, in our country, school people to become employees. It just kind of seems, you know, going out and getting a job and all of that. Hot or not, entrepreneurship maybe even serial entrepreneurship for young people?
Not.
Not. Okay, I was wrong. Tell me more.
I often get asked the question by young adults about what path they should take, say, coming out of undergrad, for instance, and they've got a lot of energy around entrepreneurship. And I love that. But I want to make a distinction between entrepreneurship, as in going off and starting my own thing from scratch that's never been created before, and I'm going to figure it out, and the entrepreneurial mindset that comes from playing the long game. And the entrepreneurial mindset from playing the long game might be something like, I'm really interested in this industry. I want to get to know the influencers in this industry. I want to understand how the machine in this industry works so that I can validate some of my hypotheses about what I think is possible to improve it. I want to build a bit of a reputation and some core skills so that when I'm out in the market and potentially raising capital from smart financiers, that I can leverage my resume as being a credible entrepreneur to back and support. So I think there's value to core skills and core networking early on before taking the I'm flying leap.
I want to dig into that a little bit, because I believe you said earlier, you and your partners dove into healthcare not knowing anything about it. So can you sort of compare and contrast sort of what that experience was and how that plays into your advice?
I was already out of school, out of undergrad, eight years. So I spent 2 years in investment banking, learning core corporate finance skills. I ran corporate development for an internet company. I went to business school. I worked in private equity. So I would say it's not about taking a leap. It's okay to take a leap and not know exactly what you're doing. But I also had a pretty good foundation to stand on from which to explore, execute, and experiment or pursue that. So yeah, I think that's the distinction, which is some of that core foundational discipline and knowledge helped me navigate when I needed help. And you build your circle of influence. I think it's easier to build your circle of influence when you're inside of an organization that is reputable and you're building core skills when you're young in your career. One person's opinion here.
Yeah, but so I agree with you. I'm sorry, Michelle. Did you have something else?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think we're on the same wavelength, though. There's a certain foundational level of maturing and growing up and understanding businesses and building relationships and all of that. And I can look back to when I first started my business, and it came with those relationships and the people who might be able to be of help to me, or I could be of help too. And I think all of that comes into play. I am going to go back to hot or not, but it's going to be a hybrid hot or not plead the fifth. This one might be, you may not be able to get out of this one. I'm just going to have to hear it. You, I think, are an adjunct professor at the University of Washington. You also went to UCLA. So I just want to know which one is hotter, Huskies or Bruins?
Well, I need to know my environment here. So I'm going to say Huskies because I run around with so many.
And you're talking to one too. So, I mean, there's a reason I asked this question, by the way. So we're off to
past. I
did not bring up
the
connected Domers of Notre Dame for a reason, because I really didn't want to get you in trouble. But I did notice that you had some Pac-12 roots, both in professorial and also from your days at UCLA. But I'm curious, can you share a little bit? What are you doing at the University of Washington as an adjunct professor?
I'm not teaching anything now. I taught a healthcare entrepreneurship course at the university. It was a undergrad course, elective course. And because I had built a couple of businesses in healthcare, and healthcare has a lot of complexity. It has, don't get me wrong, it has a lot of the same fundamentals of building any business, but there's a lot of regulatory and curious interests that play into how to build an emerging company in healthcare.
Well, Michelle, this happened to be a good segue, I guess, because we are going to take our second break to hear from our corporate sponsors. And when we come back with Russell Benaroya, we're really going to stick it to him with the plead the fifth. He's not going to be able to use your services. He's going to have to do it on his own. But we're going to find out from Russell once and for all if he's actually arrived. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors: Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, the Kitsap Sun newspaper, BC Fitness Studio, and the Upstart Group. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger, here with Dan Wheaton. Our guest today is Russell Benaroya. Now we're going to dig into my favorite segment, Plead the Fifth. This is where we get deep and vulnerable, authentic. And I know, Russell, you're going to love this.
Yeah, and I think it's her favorite because it has to do with the words plead the fifth and legal and law and all of that stuff. So I think that there's something to that as well. But I deviate. So yeah, Russell, we're going to ask you some harder questions maybe and make you dig into that vulnerability that you talked about. Again, at the end, you win absolutely nothing. And by the way, you can only plead the fifth once. So be careful, tread lightly. You mentioned, have you arrived? Well, in 2017, you wrote a poem in a poetry slam, which I've never heard of a poetry slam before doing a little digging on this. You wrote a poem. The last line is, "Or have I arrived?" So, Russell, have you arrived?
Yes.
Tell us more.
With an asterisk,
Okay.
right? Yes, with an asterisk. And I think the yes with an asterisk is the work to live my worth, not prove my worth. Live my worth, not prove my worth. So have I arrived? I am where I am. It is where I need to be. It is what it is, without lamenting about, oh, I should have, right? We live in a world of shoulds. I should have done X, or I haven't done what I want to in my head yet, which is also completely made up because the future is not here. So the answer is, it is now, and I've arrived.
It's kind of about identity, isn't it?
It is, but not getting so caught up in what that means for the purpose of showing it to other people. That's the work.
So in your journey, and we've talked a bit about pieces of it, and there's a lot more to your story that is just so interesting. Is there a pivotal moment, a place where you feel sort of defined where you were going next, that you could share?
In December of 2016, my wife and I are driving in a snowstorm on the way back from Bend, Oregon for us Pacific Northwesterners to Seattle through the Dalles. And Tony Robbins was playing a podcast, which was 3 Steps to a Breakthrough. That was his podcast title. And he said something that prompted me to turn down the dial. And I said to my spouse, Melissa, my wife, I said, yeah, Melissa, why don't we know where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years? Why haven't we ever talked about that in this like snarky, like critical tone? And she said, somewhat nonchalantly, as I remember it, oh, well, that's because it's never really been about us, Russell. It's always been about you. And we've been along for the ride. And that moment, that was the moment that ultimately triggered what became our shared journey to Costa Rica and the leap of taking that journey together as partners. That was a big, like, knock over the head in my life.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that.
What an interesting answer. I appreciate that. I am going to move us now into the running phase again of Plead the Fifth, because I want to know, especially with the trail running, what's the scariest thing that ever happened to you while running? Whether it been something jumping out of the woods or some other potential calamity. What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you while running?
Oh, well, two things come to mind. About 4 years ago, I was doing a self-supported run with a friend of mine on the Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier. It's a 93-mile run. And it was pouring. It was about 16 hours. It took us 33 hours, but 16 hours was just a torrential downpour. It's pretty remote out there. And we were about 5 hours from the finish, and you start to hallucinate. You just start to hallucinate. You haven't eaten, you haven't slept. So I think I see a parking lot, or I think I see a cafeteria, and it's like a rock. And we're running up this, well, probably at that point, walking up this trail. And all of a sudden, my friend David says, "Bear." And he pushes me like toward the bear. And I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Right. And that was probably the scariest moment. Not like he was pushing me like he wanted the bear to kill me, but I think like instinctually he's like, "Bear," and I'm like, holy smokes. That was probably my scariest moment. We were okay. I think the bear might have been more scared.
The bear might have been more scared.
Yeah. That's probably my number one. And then,
I would think so. I was
I'll
thinking
leave it there.
bear. So, okay.
So I'm curious, again, Plead the Fifth. What is your reaction to the word impossible?
My reaction to the word impossible is curiosity. My reaction to the word impossible is curiosity, because the deliverer of that word has something in their head that is driving them to believe that something is not possible. And as somebody who really likes coaching and likes getting into the context before the content, because impossible is just a word, that's just a piece of content. Curiosity is, what's underneath that? And what's usually underneath that is fear. And what's usually underneath that, right, is some story you're telling yourself that's triggering it. That's what it means. That's what comes to mind for me.
So you have done a lot of entrepreneurship things, and so this question lends itself to having some fun with a potentially new adventure. And you're the last one. We've been doing this question for a full year. You're the last one. We're going to start a new question next year. You may have heard this if you've listened to our podcast. You have to start a new business based on a hobby. What's the new business and why?
The new business based on a hobby, I would say that coaching right now in many ways for me is a hobby, right? My full-time focus is helping to scale Stride services. And the new business that I think about is how to scalably reach entrepreneurs with a model of coaching that doesn't depend or demand a single individual like me, like, oh, I have to be the one to do it, but is a model that creates more of a business platform in this area that I really enjoy and is an area of real genius zone for me, I think, that I would like to figure out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the common way that this question is phrased is, what is your superpower? But what would you say is uniquely you and has kind of driven you to success?
For many, many years, I had friends that encouraged me to do more coaching work. And by the way, the move to Costa Rica was a bit of a forcing function to do that because I didn't know what I was going to do. Like I didn't know what I was going to do for work. And so I started coaching entrepreneurs. My genius zone, my superpower, I'll use your term, my superpower is helping business leaders achieve their highest and best use, helping business owners get in their genius zone. And it's some combination of empathy, of curiosity, of peer association, kind of been there, I get it, I want to support you, and a true desire to help be a guide.
Well, Russell, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank today. For our listeners that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
I'd say call my mobile. Text me. Should I give the number? You can text me, but probably email. Russell@benarroya.net is probably the best way to do it. Some of the coaching related activity is at the benarroyagroup.com. And then of course, Stride Services is www.stride.services. That's where you'll find me.
Great. And for all of our listeners, make sure you check out the replays at shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle or wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and follow us on our show's social media pages, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, first of all, Russell, what a fun time that we had. We may have to have you come back again. We talked about so much and probably need to make sure we get more Stride stuff in later, but there's so much that you shared and talked about. Really enjoyed it. Michelle, as always, I love Washington, D.C. as well. Go out and enjoy. I hope you have good weather and get a chance to do a lot of walking around there. And we'll see you again in a month. Everybody else, I hope we see you back next week. Do exactly what Michelle said. Like us on our Facebook page because that's where we live stream every week. Our next show will be on Wednesday, May the 4th. Our guest will be Janice Mishala with Paladin Partners. My co-host will be Linda Popke. In the meantime, please be safe, be well, and be prosperous. Because until next week, you know it, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond, and the shrimp